So I somewhere felt that this law is kind of a game changer. A lot is happening under the law, significant changes are happening, which the country hadn't witnessed in the past, let's say, a couple of decades. Now, the reason of writing, I thought there is a general perception amongst people at large. They're talking about the non legal fraternity, that law is a very technical, dry, difficult subject.
Yeah.
That very well we were aware of that, that
Mm.
this is the general perception by which a common man looks at a legal subject. Why I felt that we need to break this thought pattern is that, you know, now with the changing times, dynamic and evolving laws, while on one side you have a lot of, I would say, advisory available through the internet, some at some charges, some free of cost, and so on and so forth. But if there can be user friendly, easy language, simple language issues, legal issues put together for the common man, let's say somebody who could be even a banking official or a chartered accountant, company secretary, or a businessman, an MSME owner, an MSME, I would say a manager in a decent sized company. So these are people who don't day to day interact with the law. So a law which is impacting their lives, it is impacting their entities, their companies. They should be aware of it.
And what all sectors does it cover? The IBC code?
So it covers
Does it
pretty much
cover
all the sectors. Yeah,
businesses,
it
all
covers
the sectors?
businesses across manufacturing, trading, across
Mm.
construction, real estate, power, all
Mm.
pretty much all the
Mm.
sectors. The public sector undertakings
Mm.
have been kept at the moment away from it because they're trying to avoid, because if you
Mm.
do start going into insolvency, then that will become a problem. But
Okay.
pretty much most of the companies, and from what the data shows, that largely companies in the construction and real estate sector
Hmm.
have been most impacted, which have been
Okay.
admitted into insolvency and all of that, followed by companies in the manufacturing sector. So these are some of the
Okay.
sectors which are most hit. Of course, then you have retail,
Okay.
wholesale trade. Those are smaller percentages, but yeah.
The IBC code, does it in any way empower the home buyers like this Amrapali, the famous Amrapali case and the JP case?
So when the law came in,
Mm.
initially there was a gray area. Home buyers were not given any
Mm.
special recognition. They were
Mm.
they were just, I would say, they were not at that point in time. Maybe the lawmakers did not uh, see that far, that home buyers would be impacted so much. So then they were given the
Mm.
status of a creditor by one of the amendments, and subsequently a financial creditor, which means they have a say in the decision making process. Then they were given a seat in the
Mhm.
what you call the committee of creditors and all of that. So definitely
Mhm.
they have a say, especially when they cohesively come together. The challenge that we see with home buyers is that getting them all on the same page, aligning their interests is the issue. But the government has time and again, and I've been seeing this very closely, the government has been making efforts
Mhm.
to come up with aspects like project wise insolvency. You need not put the
Okay.
entire company into insolvency. So let's say one company is running 10 projects. Four may have
Mhm.
gone bust. Four may have been,
Mhm.
in a distress situation. So why do you make the other
Mhm.
six suffer? So have project
Mhm.
wise insolvency, or try to exclude certain projects out of insolvency, so on and so forth. But of course,
Mhm.
there are legislations, there are regulations for it. But definitely, the
Mm.
home buyer today has a say. At least as a home buyer, you have some clarity that at the end of some amount of time, it could be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, either you would get your apartment by paying some
Mhm.
additional top up amount, ma'am. Just like what you call haircuts for the bankers, you will typically end up, if
Okay.
you book your apartment at, let's say, X amount, let's say 8,000 rupees per square feet,
Mhm.
for example, you may have to pay some
Mhm.
800,000, 2,500, whatever is the shortfall, to possibly ensure
Mhm.
that you get your completed apartment. I'm just breaking it down in very
Mhm.
simple words. Or you may get your entire refund, or some
Mhm.
solution is at least as a
Okay.
hope of some solution. Couple the IBC along with one of the other important laws that came in, ma'am. It's called the Real Estate Regulatory Authority, RERA. RERA का आपने
RERA,
might have
yeah.
heard about it.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So RERA puts in a lot of compliance obligations on builders, and earlier there was this whole thing of builders would take money for project A and move the money to project B, and then from there to project C, and
Mhm.
then the project A would never get completed and all of that. The JP
Mm.
Supreme Court has been very, very firm. The tribunals have been very
Mhm.
firm. So JP Infra is
Okay.
seeing at end of the day 20,000 home buyers impacted. It is seeing some hope at the end of the day. Suraksha ARC, one of
Mhm.
the companies, has taken over. They've acquired the
Mhm.
project, and the idea is to complete the project. And there is not just that the court. I mean, it's called the National Company Law Tribunal. It's not that they have just approved and say, "Ah, ठीक है, you complete it." There is a monitoring committee. There is time to time, I would say, compliances reports need to be filed, progress reports as to are these projects being completed, when are they being completed.
Mm,
So a 3 year timeline,
mhm,
if I'm not wrong, in the JP case has been sought for.
mhm,
But yes, RERA and
yeah.
IBC read together has provided a reasonable amount of protection to the home buyer. In the absence of these two laws, I think the only option was either a civil suit or going to the consumer forum,
Mm,
and they were not being very
mm,
effective at that point. So
mm,
definitely,
mm,
there is some, I would say, there's a lot more onus on the builders. IBC is a law where there is a certain waterfall mechanism that is applicable, wherein it is initially there are some insolvency costs and all of that, and then the secured creditors are supposed to get paid first. The secured, which is pretty much the
yeah.
bankers, financial creditors, the financial
Yes.
institutions, and workmen dues for 24 months and all that. So it's all stakeholders being satisfied. It's that happens in a one-off scenario. I mean, it's very. I think Binani Cements was one of those cases where for about a
Okay.
7,200 crore due total debt, the entire amount was given by Ultratech and it was taken over. But then two good cases where you could say that though there was a lot of litigation, it was tough to run those processes. SR Steel was a good case where about 50
Okay.
thousand crores dues were there, and it was still acquired by the Arsalan Mittal and the Nippon Group put together. They came up as a consortium and they acquired it for a
Mhm,
reasonable sum, about somewhere about 35,000 crores or somewhere on those lines, with a haircut of about 15%, which is still okay. And then the other being Bhushan Steel and Power. So Bhushan Steel was
okay.
also acquired by the Tata Group, which was also
Okay.
acquired at a reasonable, I would say, valuation or a reasonable price, where the haircut was not so bad to the lenders. So of course, then there are other cases such as, for example, Jet Airways issues. Ruchi Soya is another example which was acquired by the Patanjali Group. And liquidation also, which I've been trying to
Mhm,
always say, see, liquidation is not a very negative term. It sounds very, bankruptcy, liquidation. So
mhm.
I sometimes
It
believe,
does.
this law, the insolvency and bankruptcy code, first of all, should be, I think, at some point the government should consider renaming it as the restructuring of companies or restructuring in corporate insolvency code or something like that. So at least there is a
Okay.
positive connotation to it. In liquidation also, there are provisions
Mhm,
today where you can come up with some kind of revival plans. It's called schemes. You can come up
okay.
with mechanisms where the liquidator, the court officer, sells the particular unit of the company or the entire company as a going concern as in various basis. So it is not just that it comes down to the last thing. Of course, the last option is just sell whatever assets are there. But sometimes, as they
Mhm,
say, you need to bite the bullet. We need to take some tough
mhm,
decisions, and so that at least in
mhm,
future we don't have a similar
mhm,
situation going 10 years down. Now,
mhm,
with respect to the other laws, definitely quite a few other
mhm,
laws have been brought into place. For example, the Mediation Act was brought in last year, where the idea is to
mhm,
promote mediation as much as possible, make it, give it a legal standing. But that's one of the laws which I find good. Commercial Courts Act was a law which was brought into 2015 by this government, wherein
mhm,
all the commercial disputes would be decided by a specific set of benches or courts, so they don't get mixed up with your normal civil cases. So these are all
mhm,
measures to go for the ease of doing business, and commercial courts are supposed to
mhm,
work within a more stricter time frame. So that
mhm,
is the commercial court side. The third, I would say, is introduction of timelines in the Arbitration Act, the Arbitration and
mhm,
Conciliation Act, which is one of the laws of 1996, which is a very, I would say, important law for the country. They brought in an angle of timeline where the arbitration process has to get over within 12 months, extendable by 6 months, with the permission of, I think, whether if both the parties agree, and if it's beyond that, they need to go to the courts. They also brought in certain schedules where the arbitrators fee structure was all more made more viable financially, I would say. Who should be an arbitrator, who is disqualified to be an arbitrator, those were made more stricter and all of this. There have been progressive laws. There have been interesting laws where over and above, if I'm not wrong, about 30 odd labor laws have been put together in four labor codes, just four
okay.
broad labor codes, and that's also been an important step in the, I would say, putting laws together, wherein you don't have multiple laws. See, the number keeps varying. Some people say 20,000 compliances have been done away with. Some say 30,000 compliances have been done away with. So there's no specific list of number of compliances, but definitely quite a few thousands of compliances have been done away. Also, a fair bit of laws. Like for example, there was the Jan Vishwas Act, if I'm not wrong. That was one
Mm-hmm.
of the laws where about 44 laws across 29 ministries or so, there were a lot of sections were decriminalized. Now, for small small things, if there is imprisonment also as a punishment, that just kind of makes it a little bit more harassing for the business, for the entrepreneur to do the business. These have been steps that the government has been taking, I would say, in the last 8 years. The government is both, I mean, I'm saying this as a neutral party. The government is both, I would say, pro business. They're giving a good level playing field, a good ecosystem for people to come into business, and I don't see anything wrong with that. See, unless your economy is going to be strong, you're going to be resilient, you will have a good business ecosystem in place, you will have good supporting laws, your policies will not keep changing every now and then. I mean, it had gone down to a point, if I'm not wrong, in the previous regime, which is now the opposition. I would not name the industrialist, but one of the very prominent industrialists in India had gone to the extent of saying putting an industry in this country is so difficult. I'd rather go to Brazil or I'd go to Indonesia and put in my factories. I don't want to, invest anymore and work in our country. Um, there were a lot of lamenting, I would say, statements made by a lot of industrialists and businesses. At the
Mm-hmm.
same time, what I think the same very opposition tends to miss out is that while on one side they are definitely facilitating business, which is definitely very good, because it was in the previous regime where there were a lot of issues. That's when actually this whole genesis of your non-performing assets, banks, indiscriminate
Mm-hmm.
lending, um, financial, if I would say, somebody had used the word financial murder of the economy, but yeah, a mess of the
Mm-hmm.
economy was made. No proper planning, lot of issues, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
The coal blocks which were allocated, which was a scam.
Mm-hmm.
Forget the amount, 1.8 lakh crores, 2 lakh crores, that's one aspect. Ultimately, Supreme Court cancelled all of that. Same thing happened with your 2G spectrum thing, the telecom sector. So what happens is when Supreme Court cancels all these licenses, just imagine the impact on that particular sector. Investor
Yeah.
confidence is eroded. People are
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to do business with the country. India was in a
Mm-hmm.
situation where India was in a fragile five economy in 2014, if I'm not wrong. It had reached a stage where it had only, I think, 6 months worth of forex to manage its imports. Which
Okay.
when 2004, when the Vajpayee era was over, it was almost about 16 to
Mm.
17 months of forex that India had to manage its
Okay.
imports, and now it's come back to about
Mm.
11 months. So one side is
Okay.
the business part, and I can definitely speak more about it. But also, the same government has also ensured that a lot of direct beneficiary transfers, direct beneficiary schemes, the Jan Dhan
Mm.
program, which has become very popular, that has gone through.
Mm.
50 crore accounts have been opened. See, the pilferage and leakage of the middlemen, which would at some point in time
Mm.
almost constitute 35 to 40% of the actual amount which was released
Mm.
at the government level, that is
Mhm.
saved. So there is also parallelly a lot of work happening at a very grassroots level, as they say, the last mile and all of that. See, internationally, you take,
Mhm.
while again, I don't believe, I'm someone who believes that it's high time that India doesn't have to depend on the, I would say, certification of the Western world, whether
Yeah.
it is a JP
True.
Morgan, yeah, whether it's a JP
True.
Morgan or whether it's any of these standard reports which come by, and
Mm.
Credit Suisse, and we get very
Mm.
happy. IMF, we get very happy. We need to move
Mm.
beyond that. If you're talking about
Mm.
2047, where we want to lead the way, I mean, we don't need a
Mm.
certification from them. But since that has been the past, that has been the trend, you can look out their own reports, which clearly show that what was India in 2004, then in 14, and then in 2024, there has been a significant impact both on this side as well as on the side of, when you say non-business, which is basically your people at the poverty level, people at the
Yeah.
farmers, and so on and so forth. So
Mm.
there is a specific data which also says that almost 24 crore people have been brought out of
Mhm.
multi-dimensional, poverty, which is poverty from all
Mhm.
aspects. It would be wrong to say that it is only a business-friendly government. In fact, it should be a business-friendly government. Otherwise, you are dependent on, I would say, external forces, external commercial borrowings, and people from the Western world who will then at some point in time just pull the strings. And I don't think that's a good idea, ma'am. We don't want the gross NPA of our country, ma'am, out of as against the gross advances. Sometime in 1993 was about 23%. We were in that bad a shape. In 1998, it became 16%, which is when Mr. Vajpayee ji took over as the Prime Minister. And by the time her tenure was over, that had improved to 7.8%. Now,
Okay.
the impact of that was seen right until 2009, while though, because 2000, I believe 1998 to 2004 was again a time where there was a lot of nation building work done. So the impact of
Okay.
that was there until 2008, 2009. Gross NPAs were in the 2 to 3% range or 3 to 4% range, not very bad. What had happened was a lot of these loans, the genesis of it, which I always speak about, is the indiscriminate lending. When what you used to call what you can come on the lighter side call the phone banking concept, where you just get a call from so and you will have to disburse amounts. No, neither was there a valuation, nor was a collateral assessed, nor were there any, proper mechanisms to check if these loans are, being given for the rightful purposes. What is the project? What is the project likely to bring in terms of revenue? What is the forecast? None of that was really gone into it, or maybe to some extent the banks did, but not sufficiently. No loan goes bad in the second or third year of its lending. Loans start going bad or start getting negative after some amount of time, 5 years, 4 years, 5 years is what it does. So in 2009-10, when actually the banks started realizing that no, the loans are not some of the monies that we've given, those don't seem to be coming back. Now the banks didn't want to have a huge, I would say, open NPA in their balance sheet, or a negative asset on their balance sheet, or I don't know to put it this way, a liability on their balance sheet, or on books they will show as receivables and they'll pay tax over it. Why should they do that? And so therefore they started categorizing uh, them as NPAs later. But then there was some, I would say, financial jugglery done in somewhere around 2009 to 2014-15, wherein there was this whole thing of evergreening of loans, where you know that the loan is kind of gone bad, the money is unlikely to come, or only a small portion of it is going to come. But you don't want to see that as a negative loan in your books, to ensure that on 31st March every year, the interest is serviced and there is a small interest portion taken care of. They would sanction an additional amount, adjust it towards interest, and ensure that the loan looks as a standard account or doesn't look like as though it's gone red or it's gone bad. So this was something which was rolling it under the carpet for about 4 to 5 years. One, of course, there was, if I can use the word, some kind of a political pressure or something on those lines to not blow it up at that point in time. Otherwise, the economy would have gone into shambles, because a few banks would have
Okay.
collapsed and it would have gone into a different thing altogether. The other thing is also, ma'am, what happens is the banking officials, while some of them know that this is going in the wrong direction, see, let's accept one harsh fact that nobody wants to take the tough step when they are on the seat, because the question and the buck comes and stops at you, and the question is asked to you as to why was this, you know,
Allowed.
why did why does this loan go bad? What steps did you take? What measures did you take? So on and so forth. Plus, also, it was, if I may use the word, some kind of a mutual understanding between the borrowers and lenders. Ki, let this continue. It's okay, because none of them thought that this will, cycle into or get into something so big that they won't be able to handle it. There's always this positive hope that sometimes the business has, especially when it is going on the distress side, that you will find an investor who will come in and support you. You will find some third party who will come in as a joint venture partner, bring in the funds, so on and so forth. So, to some extent, I would say it was lack of clear, transparent, accountable policies on behalf of the banks to the RBI, to the government, which a lot of it has been brought in now in the last few years. Why did they not open up and announce that yes, these loans have gone bad? It would have impacted, dented the economy, the image of the banks. It would have exposed these companies to be companies which have gone bad, for which the banks would have had to go behind these companies to take whatever recovery action that they had to take. And they didn't have the political mandate, or they didn't have the I would say, strength to do that. You may call it financial strength, the sanctions, the permissions, they were somewhere missing. So that was one reason why this was constantly getting rolled over for quite some time. Like I have a list of some willful defaulters in which loans were granted to some companies even after they were declared insolvent. ABG Shipyard was one of those companies. Videocon Industries. These are companies which there have been. It's in public. Whatever I'm telling you is on public. Information is available in public platforms. As to these companies were already defaulting, and they still were given some additional loans. There are quite a few. The list is a huge one, but yeah, this is what was happening. Actually, there are recoveries that have been happening. As per one of the statements given by the Minister of State for Finance, this happened. This was about a year and a half back, against about 22,000 crores or 23,000 crores of the total debt that that had accrued to these two or three, Nirav Modi, Mehul Choksi, and Vijay Mallya, these three groups. A reasonable part of it, I would say about 15,000 crores, have been one way or the other, their personal assets have been confiscated, their inventories have been confiscated, some money is coming back to the banks. Now, how much of these numbers are true, untrue, that we don't know. We're not very sure because we, end of the day, rely upon a statement made. And when a statement is made in an official platform, of course, we take it that this is the right statement. But I know for a fact, on a first-hand basis, that, and since I'm advising the I would say, relevant stakeholders who need to get those monies now in a lot of the Modi companies, there is actually work happening at the ground level. There are these companies which have been put into the insolvency IBC process. Recoveries are being made. It may be small, but whatever inventories are there, whatever was attached by the enforcement directorate, slowly, one by one, the inventories are getting released. The inventories basically whatever gems, jewels, and all of that. It's all getting attached. Their personal assets are getting attached. See, we may not be able to recover the 100%. 100%, though we are not able to recover even in the Indian companies with the promoter sitting inside the country. But one, recoveries are happening, and two, unfortunate, ma'am. Just imagine. Today, I am asking you. Let's say I am on the opposite side. I am asking you. Oh, so many haircuts are happening. You are writing off loans. Industrialists की सरकार है. आप you're writing away the loans given to industrialists. Banks are suffering, but they are the same people who sanction these loans. They are the same people who pressurize the banks to give these loans. These loans were given under, I would say, a lot of reluctance. That is not being questioned because that has become an old, and people have kind of a bit of a short memory. So that's something which I want people to understand. That please go do your fact finding. Don't even go by my word. Go do your own basic fact finding. Today, internet has a lot of decent, credible data. See when loans were given. See what happened. And it is like this: the facilitator of the wrongdoer is not being questioned, but the person who's correcting things, sorting things right, you are questioning. You're questioning that person. That's unfair. Possibly, I would say the previous regime took us back about 20, 30 years. God knows where we were. We were lost. We were neither here nor there. Rather, we were in a pretty fragile situation. If you see 2014, the government comes in. 2015, IMF comes up with a report which starts saying that the near-term growth of this particular government and the country is seeming to be positive. There are things getting better. Policy decisions are started to be taken. Initiatives are starting. By 2017, IMF says that the medium-term prospects of India are better based on XYZ parameters. Now, looking at in terms of what work they have done, because we are today the fifth largest economy, we are looking at becoming the third largest in 2 to 3 years, and we are looking at 2047 being a developed economy, which to me, by and large, means ensure that there is no aspect of poverty, minimize poverty, ensure that you also increase per capita GDP. Khali dekhiye, there's no point me saying that we are the third largest economy or fifth largest economy. And if your poverty levels and your income distribution thing is so unequal. So we need to ensure that aspect is also being taken care of. But the amount of work that we all know has been done on the infrastructure side. For example, the number of highways constructed, kilometers. I was reading somewhere that about 16,000 kilometers of highway was constructed in the 10 years of the previous regime. And in this regime, it's almost 45,000 kilometers of highway. Same thing, but it's way double. The number of airports have increased from 75, 76 airports to almost 149 airports in the last 10 years. Multiple parameters. I would say the electric rail routes. from about 22,000 kilometers, which was there as on 2014. In 2024, this comes to touches about 50,000 kilometers. So there's a lot of infrastructure development. But today we
mm,
are getting equipment for thermal imaging. We are getting our own equipment. We are spending on
mm,
defense. We are spending on spirituality
mm,
tourism and things around that.
mm,
A lot of inflow is into the country. There are funds, ma'am. Goldman Sachs, for example, has come up with a specific India index fund, so that there are a lot of investors across the world who want to invest in India in equity, which shows the confidence that they have in the Indian economy. And this is not, mind you, most importantly, ma'am, this is not external commercial borrowing. See, borrowing is something which is a loan, which you have to give. आज नहीं
mm,
तो कल आपको वापस देना पड़ेगा, which was growing at some 21% CAGR, but 20 at almost 20% per year. The previous regime was increasingly taking loans. Here,
mm,
today there's a reverse situation where foreigners don't want to miss out on the India success story, and they want to ensure
mm,
that they also are a part of it and they invest and make some equity gains out of it. So
mm,
even if for some reason that particular company collapses or something goes off, it's not an additional debt burden on the country. It's an
mm,
equity which is
mm,
coming. So there are a lot
mm,
of such things which have been happening. Larger picture, if one sees and doesn't see this only in silos or in specific compartments, when you see all
mm,
this together, one does have a definite sense of, I would say, confidence and a sense of assurance that we are at a reasonably strong position today. See today, example, the Russia-Ukraine war. Everybody was watching what does India do in the UN, whether it votes against or
mm,
for or it abstains, and what does it
mm,
do. It managed to do the
mm,
right thing, or whatever it managed to do
mm,
something, where it still had the support of
mm,
Russia. Ukraine didn't
mm,
go against it, and we did. So
mm,
today it matters what India does. We were nowhere in this position.
mm,
So to answer your
mm,
question is, will where do you see India? In to 2028, 29, and then going forward beyond that.
mm,
I am optimistic. I am positive. I am hopeful that we have stable regime. The one that's there already continues for more time because the first 5 years they were figuring out what the mess is. They started putting things in place. Last five
yeah.
years, as I see purely from an economic and monetary perspective, economic, monetary, legal
Mm,
perspective, they have started rolling out things. They have started clearing up a lot of mess. They have started setting the foundation blocks. You need to
mm,
give a good regime another solid 5-10 years for them to ensure that these you know whatever efforts that they're making today, that comes into some kind of tangible
mm,
results which we can again quantify based on data. One,
mm,
bring in a system like your civil services, All India Civil Services equivalent for All India Judicial Services. Ensure people are
mm,
recruited on merit, train them well, and put them in respective courts so that they can come up the ladder based on merit.
mm,
Meritocracy is very important. Number two,
mm,
for the pending cases, there is already a lot of wherever government is a litigant. There are some policies where
mm,
Vivad se Vishwas and things like that. A little bit of more push is required towards that. More push towards mediation
okay.
which the government has started doing. Uh,
Mm,
Definitely, we need a huge, I would say, additional set of judges, support staff to be recruited on an yesterday basis. And that's something which the government, I think, should do, should be one of its top priorities because you have all this economic development, you have everything, but if the man in the country is not able to get justice, the common man, the
mm,
man in the last mile
yeah.
is not able to get justice, I don't think it's fair.
Mm,
So
mm,
something has to be done there. The good things that have happened, of course, maybe it was an aftermath of COVID. Online hearings have started, virtual hearings have started, which
mm,
started saving cost for the litigant. They don't have to travel
mm,
all the way down to the concerned court and so on and so forth. But again,
mm,
problem is for that you need good technology infrastructure and things like that.
mm,
Also, we have to come to a system where, in some cases, maybe let the parties only file the, if I may use the word, written arguments, not get into detailed arguments which goes on for very long and so things like that. Of course, that cannot be a one size fits all. So cases will have to be
mm,
categorized in different types. Whichever cases are
mm,
not worth extending, uh, try to mediate, push for me, which the government is doing. Come up with time-bound mediations. See, you cannot stop from
mm,
people from going to court. In fact,
mm,
one way that I see it is, if you have so many cases pending in the courts, yes, that's a problem because our ratio for judges to the number of population is less. But it also shows the
mm.
faith of the common man in the judiciary.
In the
That person
judiciary,
thinks,
yeah.
if nowhere else, somewhere at least in the judiciary is where I will ultimately get my due. I will get my
Mm,
justice eventually.
justice. Mm,
So that's the other way of looking at it. So
Hmm.
efficiency has to be brought in there. For example, you have
Hmm.
High Court judges retiring at 62, Supreme Court judges retiring
Hmm.
at 65. They are at the peak of their intelligence, their best, their experience. Why are you letting them go? If
Hmm.
they have specially that you said, I mean, let there be independent. Let there, for example, a committee which can have a set of
Hmm.
independent, objective parameters. And if some judges
Hmm.
are meeting, or the whichever judge is meeting those parameters, they can be given an extension or retained for another 3 to 5 years.